The market doesn't know what keeps you up at night. It doesn't know when you want to retire, and it doesn't know how old you are. The simple truth is, the market doesn't care. But if you care, you've tuned into the right place. You're listening to Investor Resources, bringing clarity to the confusing world of finance. Here are your hosts of Investor Resources, Don Creech and Perry Sykes.
I'm Don Creech.
And I'm Perry Sykes, and welcome to the Investor Resources Podcast. If you're enjoying these, please make sure to subscribe to make sure you get all the newest ones that we put out. And feel free to forward this to your family and friends and coworkers and help us get the word out about these. Thank you very much.
So the odds are you're listening to this because it has the magic word in front of the title, Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is popular today and has become more so this last year and a half or two. The other anomaly is it an acronym? You probably didn't know that. And frankly, until we got ready for this podcast, I did not either.
Yeah, there you go.
It's been turned into an acronym, or at least there's an attempt to do so by legislation. There is this article calls the lady a crypto shill, a senator.
There you go.
A senator from Wyoming. She's introduced legislation, and it's called, here comes an acronym part, Boosting Innovation, Technology, and Competitiveness, that's the C part, through Optimized Investment Nationwide. BITCOIN. Bitcoin.
Love it.
It's now a government an acronym. Now, it's amazing. And the big move, there is a big move, and it hasn't been finalized yet, but this is maybe a first start of that, is to get the Federal Reserve to start acquiring Bitcoin for the benefit of the citizenry and the security of the banks, or any other reason they can think of.
Which is so interesting because half the story of Bitcoin is it's a global currency not controlled by any country, no central bank. And now all of a sudden they're very interested in having the U.S. Federal Reserve buy a huge position in Bitcoin, which should raise an eyebrow or two, wondering, so what exactly are these folks after here?
Well, there has to be a motive.
Right?
Since the last thing you want is government access to your money, how come the government should have access to this much of Bitcoin? And I'm sure there's pressure in probably Japan and the ECB to acquire a position in Bitcoin. Also, back in the United States, part of the problem with the Fed and nationally is our balance sheet. And the Fed owns tons of gold. And do you remember what it is, Perry? 40?
It's 261 million troy ounces of gold.
Well, that's a ton of gold.
That's
And
8,133 metric tons, in fact. So
that's a lot. So on our webcast, our webinars, we have some people who are, and among our clients, who
sure.
are dyed-in-the-wool gold investors. It is their protection for what they believe is the inevitable collapse of the U.S. economy because of our extended debt, and the dollar has to go away, and we're going to be faced with another depression or some reason along that line. But they don't ever sell it. And you mentioned, Perry, that we had one of those individuals on our last webinar, and and we know him.
Sure.
He's been a long time contact, and so I sent him an updated gold picture, or gold chart from
There you go.
what I did this weekend. And he wrote me back. He said, "Thank you very much, and I understand your position on gold is different than mine. I was first introduced to gold when I lived in Germany years ago, and I talked to my banker and said, 'Can you acquire some 1 ounce gold coins for me?' And he said, 'Oh, you should not do that. It's overvalued at $400 an ounce.'"
Right.
So he said, "I bought them anyway, and I still have them." So at $2,700 today, that's worth a lot more money. I don't know how much he bought. He didn't tell me. But the fact is, when you buy gold as an investor, as we pointed out to him years ago, you go for from 2011 to just recently
Right.
treading water. It's under the high price. We now have some new highs on it. But the issue here with the Fed and Bitcoin is particularly for early investors in Bitcoin, which isn't decades ago. There's they, how do you get rid of it? How do you convert it to actually do something with it? Because it is not yet a currency. It's really hard to go buy something with Bitcoin. There aren't very many
Correct.
marketplaces. You can't go in and fill up your tank of gas with Bitcoin. You can't charge your electric car with Bitcoin. It's a pretty restricted asset. So how can you convert it into something that's more readily marketable? And that would be to get the Federal Reserve to change the value of their gold holding at from $42 legislated $42 an ounce to market
Yeah.
price. Market price here today, as we record this, is around $2,700. I don't know exactly where it closed today, but it's close to $2,700. So if they did that, that would change the value. What did we say before? From $11 billion in the stated value on the books
Right.
to $688 billion. And the crypto guys say, well, use that extra money to get something worthwhile, like buy Bitcoin.
And
And
that's part of the bill. That's part of the legislation. They're gonna buy 200,000 bitcoins a year until they own at least a million Bitcoin. And one of the primary reasons, like you said, Don, is that the wealth in Bitcoin is far more concentrated than the wealth in the dollar or the wealth in gold. And those people who have a lot of it have no way to get it out. If they liquidated their position, it would collapse the market and eliminate, number one, any more gains for them, and then no one else could bail out either. So it's like one person can pull the ripcord. Everybody else essentially is going to fund that, and then nobody else is going to get out for who knows another few decades if the price runs back up. But if they can get the United States to revalue their gold reserve and then spend that excess money that's going to be generated, the extra hundreds of billions of dollars, put that in Bitcoin, they're going to have a huge buyer that's going to add some really badly needed liquidity to that Bitcoin market, and that's the focus of what they're doing. And some people actually do believe it's a good idea. Let's get us completely out of the gold business. Let's own some Bitcoin, and that's always good when it's going up. But man, when it's heading south, they're not going to feel so cheerful about that anymore.
I've I don't know who actually created Bitcoin. I'm pretty certain they're not U.S. citizens.
Right.
If they were, I'm pretty certain that they voted for Donald Trump because the idea of taxing unrealized capital gains every year would be
Right.
a massive problem.
Correct. It's
That's
it's correct. And Bitcoin understands they've got a structural issue with the way Bitcoin works, and so they're really out there making sure everyone knows that the one of the biggest knocks against Bitcoin as well. It's just out there for people to make transactions and illegal commodities, and that's where all the crime is committed. The Bitcoin people will tell you the illegal trade in dollars dwarfs what happens in Bitcoin because there are so many more dollars out there. So if you want to really attack illegal currency transactions and buying illegal goods, the dollars where that happens, the vast majority of it. Bitcoin being on the blockchain, it's very transparent. It's very tough to counterfeit, and so it's much more above board than the dollar. If you're talking to the Bitcoin folks, not if you've had your Bitcoin stolen somewhere. Then it's way worse because
Or
you
you
can't
lost
get
your
it back
key.
either. Yep, you can't. You lose your key and you're done. That's right. So it's not that it's without trouble, but they're saying if you give it a fair shake, it's at least as good as gold, if not better. Um,
Well,
Unfortunately, there's no way to get around the fact that Bitcoin's intrinsic value is zero. It's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is worth what the next person's willing to pay for it, and that's it. Just like Beanie Babies. It's the valuation process is the same. Whatever someone else will pay you for it is what it's worth today, and that's an issue that's going to be tough, especially when you're looking at asking a country to put billions of dollars from the Federal Reserve into said valueless currency. That's a tough sell, I think.
Well, it's also illiquid. I
Oh,
just think,
very.
what do you go buy with it? I mean,
Yeah,
you certainly cannot operate your household with a Bitcoin budget. That doesn't work. When
you
you take
can't.
a look at the number of transactions that occur in currencies, not just the dollar, but the yen or the franc or the euro, uh,
Sure.
it doesn't matter which one of those you pick. If you look at Bitcoin, there were only 660,000 transactions in Bitcoin in the last 24 hours. Well, that's not very many when you look at the market. If you look at a stock
No.
market or the treasury market or the dollar, the currency market, I mean, this is piddling money. I mean, you hardly can find it on a chart if you wanted to plot it out. And 70% of the Bitcoins that are owned didn't trade at all last year.
Right.
So
And
nobody
and
bought
that's
anything with it.
right. And you see more and more people advertising, we Bitcoin taken here, we'll do transaction in Bitcoin, but the number of transactions in Bitcoin are the same now as when Bitcoins were first came out. There is no increase in the amount of transactions happening in Bitcoin. It's very small, it's very controlled, and it's nowhere near big enough to be called a currency, like you said, Don.
So you compare 660,000 transactions a day to Amazon that does 40 million transactions a day.
That's not exactly the same. Yeah.
There's currency being involved in those transactions, and the Bitcoin
That's
is not.
liquidity right there. Yeah.
That's right. That's not happening with the Bitcoin. That's not
No.
that we're opposed to Bitcoin. It's just that a lot of the claims don't make a lot of sense. It is a speculative investment. It's a very high risk, highly volatile asset, and if one of the reasons that it is likely to continue to rise in price, at least is the argument on Wall Street, is that there are now, I think there's 11 new ETFs for buying Bitcoin this year,
Ha.
and more in registration. So
Yep.
it's going to be made available in some retirement plans that I've read as a fiduciary. Given the risk associated with it, I don't think that'll be an easy adoption, but some may. But the financial services industry, whose job is to market anything people want to buy, is going to
Correct.
make it available to a massive retail investor base, saying, well, you should have had Bitcoin last year, and look how much better off you would be. Let's put some in your portfolio because
Yep.
it's bound to do better. And then um, pray it doesn't go down as much as it has in the past.
Correct.
That,
And there and
more's coming. We'll learn more as things go along, and the next time we have a major bear market in Bitcoin, there'll be a lot of backtracking going on.
there
Anyway,
will.
you probably have friends, family, or coworkers that have similar interests to yours, and if you do, we'd appreciate it if you would share this podcast with them. You can share our weekly insights. If you go and you if you aren't subscribing to that, go to our website. The shortcut to the website is IRI, that's three letters, IRIradio.com, and sign up for our weekly newsletter. Sign up for our next webinar. We do a monthly webinar on the first Saturday of every month, giving a summary of where we are, what portfolio changes we've made, what our outlook is for what lies ahead. Thanks for being with us. Subscribe to the podcast. The button's right down below. We look forward to seeing you on our next issue.